This is a Mercedes A-Class, an A200, the 1.3 litre turbo, and it's kind of an interesting car. This is the 2022 model, and we're going to take a look at it. Styling-wise, this is not the newest model. It is the 2022 model, but the newest facelift model has just come out. But I think they've softened it a little since the last version. It still looks fairly premium, fairly high-tech. In fact, almost everything on the car looks premium and kind of has that sort of air of, you know, Mercedes wealth that normally comes with that three-pointed star. That styling carries on to the back, and in the boot we have 335 litres of boot space, or about 1200 with the seats folded down, which isn't too bad, especially for a car of this size, although it is a little on the smaller end compared to things like Golf or the Audi A3. Up in the front is a very nice place to be, at least in terms of aesthetic. See, much like the outside where this looks incredibly premium and fancy, in here it's exactly the same. Everything from the steering wheel to the air vents that look fantastic, they look amazing, the little dip switches for controlling, you know, climate controls and stuff, the touchpad, the Alcantara, okay, that is actually quite nice. Everything looks amazing and super premium in here. Until you start touching stuff, and then you realize that everything is kind of plasticky. It's a lot less premium than you might think you might like, especially for this sort of price tag of car. The air vents look amazing, but they're plastic, and I can just imagine them breaking at some point. And the biggest disappointment for me has to be these dip switches. They look like knurled, you know, aluminium. They look fantastic. And then you hit them and they're really, really like cheap sort of flick switches, and it's just a bit disappointing. Now, that's not to say that everything in here is, you know, horrible to touch. It's certainly nice enough. You have plenty of controls on the steering wheel too, for the right hand for your you know, instrument cluster display, and your left hand for your navigation sort of infotainment display. But it is just a little bit cheaper in here than it looks, for sure. When it comes to the displays, on the infotainment screen you have, I believe, Android Auto and definitely Apple CarPlay, because we have that working, although it seems like you can't get the full screen version. Maybe that's an option, we're not sure, but the standard infotainment does do a pretty decent job. You have navigation, obviously radio, and all of your usual things. The main instrument cluster is also display. It's actually a lot smaller of a display. It can only fit one gauge on it at a time, but it does do a decent enough job. It does have some of the extra smart features like sort of lane assist, lane departure assistant, that sort of stuff. Obviously cruise control you can set on the wheel, and even like voice inputs, both from you know, the Mercedes voice inputs, or if you do have something like Apple CarPlay connected, if you hold down one of the buttons it will let you do Siri. But it's not too bad in here, but it's definitely not as premium as it looks. And when it comes to the back seats, I've positioned the front seat where I would put it. I'm 6 foot tall, and you know, I don't have leg room here. I can just about fit. Obviously I physically am sitting here, but I'm not exactly comfortable. I'm sort of scrunched in. My head is definitely pressed up against the roof if I don't, you know, unless I'm properly curled over. And it is a little narrower back here than someone of my width would probably like. You do have a middle seat, but it's definitely, you know, you're gonna fit 3 smaller people back here rather than 3 full-size male adults. The seats themselves are relatively comfortable. You do have the sort of Alcantara middle with the then leather or full leather, whatever, outers. There is a middle seat, like I said. You don't seem to have an armrest, but you do have plenty of child seat anchors, so if you do want to put your kids back here, that's kind of what this is really designed for. And if it's of any importance, you do have a USB-C, I suppose, charger in the back. There is also another USB-C in the front for your Android Auto Apple CarPlay connection, but you know, if your kids or whatever want to charge their phones in the back, you do have that option. And when you're in the front seat of this, it's a bit of a hairdryer sometimes when you really floor it, but this is the 1.3, it's the A200, which has about 163 horsepower, which is fine for a car of this size. Obviously, as you probably well know, I'm used to a little bit more than that, but I think the main thing is that this is mated to a dual clutch, a 7-speed dual clutch transmission, and I think that's probably the biggest area of concern. I think the thing that lets it down the most. As you can probably hear, in terms of, motorway driving, that sort of thing, this isn't too bad. It's because of the shorter wheelbase compared to the cars that we normally drive, which are a little longer. It feels a little bit more skittish, a little bit difficult to, keep nice and central. But it's still decent enough. The road noise is definitely on the louder side though, as you can probably hear. We're hearing basically all of the tire noise, remarkably not that much wind noise, but still it's a little on the louder side in here. You definitely want your radio on to be feeling comfortable in here for longer journeys. Of course, being front-wheel drive, you do have plenty of grip, even in sort of adverse conditions, but that also does mean that it's not going to be the most fun vehicle for you to drive. It's still decent enough, handles relatively well, as we'll soon find out. And like I said, for this sort of motorway driving, cruising, it's perfectly fine. It's a little bit more of a sort of a mental workload to, do this sort of drive compared to my S4, but it's obviously a very different class of car. Although the price tag might make you think twice about that one. It's hard to tell if this is something that is, endemic to the Mercedes A-Class of this vintage, or if it's just this vehicle, but we can definitely hear a whistling from the outside, the sort of thing that you would normally hear from like having roof bars or roof rack, but we don't have those, and I hear it from somewhere near the front. Again, I'm not sure if that's just because this is a car that's done about 20,000 miles, or if it's, this generation of car, but something to potentially listen out for if you're planning on going for a test drive. Like I said, the DSG is definitely one of the weirder parts of this car. As you can probably hear, the engine note is not exactly the most sporty, the most invigorating. You definitely want to keep this in lower RPMs for your best experience. In terms of the power delivery, it seems to be relatively flat, although I think it does kind of run out in the upper rev range, which is pretty standard for a small displacement, small turbo engine like this. I must admit that we just tested out the braking and it is remarkably good. I think because of the distinct lack of weight here, the braking performance was pretty fantastic. The normal pedal feel is a little bit sort of sharp, a little bit bitey. It does take some getting used to, but the outright braking performance, emergency braking, I'm really quite impressed with this. Like I mentioned though, the biggest sort of quirk of the car is the DSG. This is, well, at least from my experience, a little bit unpredictable. I think you do get used to what it's going to do, but it's a little on the weird side. It holds gears quite long. It will let the car roll back when you're at a stop, which is possibly the biggest problem. You can also feel it disengaging or holding the gear when you're braking, so you can see the revs plummeting as you're braking, or you can feel it just like clunk out of engine braking, and then you have to adjust your brake pedal pressure to, deal with that. There's lots of little quirks with it that make it so that I kind of would just want a manual in this car. Pulling off the line is also one of those things that you're never quite sure if it's going to do what you want it to do, if it's going to let the car roll and take an extra long time to actually take off, or if it's going to properly, engage and floor it for you. It's a little, at least from my experience, a little unpredictable. It also seems to be very aggressive on downshifts occasionally. When I'm just gently putting in some pressure, it will, downshift, but if I put in some more, sometimes it doesn't. It's definitely, at least from my limited experience driving it, a little on the unpredictable side. It also... What was that?
That is what made me shit myself on the motorway.
Fucking hell.
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah. I don't want to. Get away from me.
Like I was avoiding a pothole.
Well, clearly you should have gone through it.
Apparently. So one of the interesting things is that Mercedes has added the lane keep assistant and lane departure warning. We just had it happen, and I can't show you that because I swore quite a lot, but it was kind of terrifying because I was avoiding a very large pothole. We were also on a bit of road where there was a full sort of central reservation, unlike what we're currently on, and it decided to shake the wheel. I thought I felt it brake, and I don't know, I don't think it actively steered, but it showed up in the dash, it vibrated the wheel, and I felt it brake a little, I think. Which is something that really terrifies me because I was in control of the vehicle at the time and it just took control away from me. And I really, really don't like those sorts of assistance features that just end up taking away control from a driver who is actually paying attention and driving properly. One of the quirks of the DSG is that it seems to have incredibly sort of aggressive gearing. You can be in the 7th gear, the maximum gear, at like 40 miles an hour, which means that when you're running at, say, motorway speeds, it needs to downshift to be able to go from, like 70 miles an hour to 72. And that's kind of a big deal because you have very much, I would call it city gearing. It is very much meant to be as economical while you're just trundling around your little village or city like this. But when you actively have to go for it to, drive up a big national speed limit hill, well, it has to downshift like crazy. And then you get the beautiful noises that this engine performs. When it comes to the fuel economy, especially because this is a relatively small, 1.3 turbo engine, you do get pretty good economy from this. In motorway driving, you tend to get, I think, around or over 50 miles to the gallon, although if you're only doing motorway, and especially if you're doing more conservative speeds, you might be able to push this to something more like 60, which is definitely impressive for being a petrol car and being one with still 163 horsepower. That's definitely not too bad. When it comes to comfort up front, the seats are definitely on the firmer side, and at least for my wider body, they are a little on the tight side for me. I think with the right, sort of body size and shape, you'd be fine, but they're definitely on the firmer side. They do feel like sport seats, which, as far as I'm aware, they aren't, but they do have the sort of integrated headrest, which is also a little bit annoying in terms of adjustment and the fact that I don't have any for me. I think overall it's certainly nice enough in here. The lack of sound deadening does seem like a bit more of a problem for motorway driving for me. It is remarkably loud in here. You do really hear kind of everything, and that whistle, I don't know whether it's factory or whether it's just from this specific vehicle, but it does kind of get on your nerves a little bit. The whole DSG thing where it really doesn't work very well, it doesn't grab on when you really want it to, but it also holds gears when you, again, don't want it to. All of those things make it a bit of an uncomfortable and not necessarily worrying, but not confidence-inspiring experience. I think the main thing for me, though, is the price tag of this vehicle. Even this 2022 model with about 20,000 miles seems to be going for about 26, 27, 28,000 pounds, which seems like an awful lot of money for a car that it doesn't feel like 28 or so thousand pounds worth of car, if that makes sense. I think while my preferences are for vehicles like my Audi S4, slightly larger, slightly better equipped, slightly faster, obviously a bit less economical, but even if my preferences would like me to have something like that instead, I still think that there are other vehicles that you could buy, even in this sort of class, that are at very least at the same sort of price point, but a bit more premium feeling, a bit more comfortable, a bit more refined, a little bit more power, all those sorts of things. I just don't know if this is the best place to spend your money. Of course, those are my thoughts, but I would love to hear yours in the comments down below. What do you think about the A200 and the A-Class in general? Is this the sort of model that you'd be interested in? Do you prefer something more, I don't know, budget, like a Peugeot? Or do you prefer something a little bit more but high-end, fancy, like like we tend to. Feel free to let me know in the comments down below. Of course, if you want to see more videos like this one, you can hit the subscribe button, turn on the bell notification icon, and you can check out plenty of other reviews, guides, and a load of other car stuff on the channel, on the end cards that will pop up hopefully now. Otherwise, that is kind of it. If you want to, let me know what you think, feel free to do so in the comments down below. But otherwise, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the next video.